It serves the evangelical monster that controls much of what the Republican Party does and believes.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a good transition into our next topic because, Liz Cheney has been making the rounds promoting her book, which is now a #1 bestseller. And
good for you, Liz.
And she's been making the rounds. But what she's talking about in her book and in her interviews is very similar to what we heard from Mitt Romney when the book about Mitt Romney was published. He didn't write that book. That was McKay Coppins. But they are talking about the same thing, which is that Republicans really don't have any kind of moral values. And we're seeing that in this discussion about Texas as well. They don't really have moral values, guiding principles. They're all about what is politically expedient. And we have a perfect example of this with Liz Cheney talking about Kevin McCarthy. Before we get into exactly just how depraved and without a moral compass Kevin McCarthy is, I want to play a clip of him this week talking about after everything that has happened, Kevin McCarthy is saying that he will support Donald Trump as the nominee and that he will even work in his administration if called.
Will Donald Trump be the nominee?
Yes. And the Republican Party? Yes. And if Biden stays as the nominee for the Democrats, I believe Donald Trump will win. I believe the Republicans will gain more seats in the House and the Republicans will win the Senate.
Can he count on your support?
Yes. That's
an endorsement.
I will support the president. I will support President Trump.
Would you be willing to serve in a Trump cabinet?
In the right position. Look, if I'm the best person for the job, yes. Look, I worked with President Trump on a lot of policies. We worked together to win the majority. But we also have a relationship where we're very honest with one another.
Oh, honest and Kevin McCarthy don't usually line up real well in sentences.
Well, it's also, we know no one can be honest with Donald Trump. No one can be honest with him. He is a frail little man who surrounds himself with yes men.
Yeah.
He cannot have people around him that tell him the truth. If he had that, he wouldn't be facing the dozens of felony charges that he's currently facing. He's only gotten himself into trouble because no one will tell him the truth.
Can I before we move on here, how bad at earnestness is Kevin McCarthy? It's just so put upon. It's so just forced.
Jesse.
Yes. Oh, I would. Yes. I believe that Donald Trump, if Joe Biden is the nominee, Donald Trump will win. And not only will Donald Trump win, we will take back the House in greater fashion and we will take back the Senate. This is what I believe.
Oh, I thought you were going to do the part where he's like, will I work in the administration? Yes, if the job is a right fit for me. Right. That's what matters.
You'll take any position within a Trump administration, dipshit. Oh, Secretary of Commerce? Oh, yes, please. I can't wait to do that job.
So, okay, this is where we get to the Liz Cheney clip because, of course, she's promoting her book and she's talking about things behind the scenes, which would have been nice to know, as soon as they happened. And this is what's frustrating about the book writing process.
Yes.
Is that she's going to be talking about basically the scene when back near January 6th, when all this stuff was going down with Donald Trump denying the election and Kevin McCarthy behind the scenes acting like Donald Trump was wrong and just needed time to go through this. But then he made appearances on Fox News that were to the contrary. And instead of Liz Cheney going on Twitter and saying, hey, here's a recent appearance from Kevin McCarthy on Fox defending everything Trump's doing, I just need everyone to know that behind the scenes, he's saying something completely different. No, she waited a few years for her book to come out. And this is kind of the problem.
She waited until she wasn't a congresswoman anymore, then wrote the book.
Right. This is the problem.
Yeah.
We need you to do it in the moment. We need you to be telling the truth when you have the power, when you're in the rooms.
Yeah.
Go ahead and sacrifice yourself then. But okay, we'll take a step back. We'll take a step back and we'll hear the full
Please
picture.
Try to be like Brittany.
Just be more like Brittany.
Maybe not right now, but okay, let's hear the full picture.
2 days after the 2020 election, you're talking to then leader Kevin McCarthy. He tells you that Donald Trump, quote, knows it's over and that he needs time to, quote, go through the stages of grief. And then almost immediately you see this on Fox News.
President Trump won this election, so everyone who's listening, do not be quiet. Do not be silent about this. We cannot allow this to happen before our very eyes.
This is a theme throughout the book, so much so I could fill an hour of examples of Kevin McCarthy saying something to you that is rational and reality-based, and then going on TV and doing the exact opposite. For example, saying he's going to withdraw objections to the electoral count and then doing the exact opposite. You go so far as to, at one point, Donald Trump uses a word, a euphemism, a feline euphemism, to describe Kevin McCarthy, and you agree with him, with Donald Trump. But it's worse than that, because that cravenness, in your view, it really puts the country in jeopardy. Right. Why? Why is he like that?
Yeah. I don't know the why, but what I can tell you is, it became very clear that when you're the leader, and each time you have a choice to make and you decide that you're going to do the wrong thing, you lead the whole conference in that direction. Now, there were people that were very certainly willing to go with him, but, situations, for example, like when the issue of objecting to electoral votes came up, and you had these freshman members who had just been elected. They hadn't been in office more than a couple of days, and they were being asked to cast this crucially important vote. Are you going to object to electoral votes? It was clear there was no basis in the Constitution for them to do so. And I had a couple of them tell me that Kevin was meeting with them privately, telling them this isn't that big a deal. Really, the easy political vote is just to go ahead and object. And when you think about the damage that does when it's the leader, and he's actually telling people, don't worry, essentially, about your constitutional obligations. Here's the political expedient path to take. And of course, we saw where that led Republicans through the course of the months leading up to January 6th and afterwards.
Now, look, all of the "are you surprised" guys in the comments, if that's what you're thinking, is, well, is anybody surprised by this? No, of course we're not surprised by this. But when we have verification from a credible source of someone who was in the room and heard the conversation, it needs to be talked about. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be drilled in the heads of those who might be on the fence, who still... It's like the straw that broke the camel's back. There's just one more, and then finally they're like, all right, this is enough. I've had enough. There are maybe millions of those people out there, and this information could possibly move the needle.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. That's definitely the hope of talking about it, and that's why it is frustrating to know when people like Liz Cheney or Mitt Romney are sitting on very important information about how two-faced and two-sided and only consumed with power their colleagues are. They sit on that information, and then there's, little that we can do about it now. I mean, Kevin McCarthy is quitting. He's leaving Congress. Yeah,
and it's not just two-faced about, he was for the infrastructure bill but voted against it because of whatever political machinations. We're talking about American democracy. We're talking about the continuation of the country in the way that it has been known and understood for 250 years. We're talking about saying the election was stolen, that Donald Trump won in 2020 when he lost by 7+ million votes. This is more serious and more consequential than just saying one thing in public and thinking another thing in private.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ugh.
So another issue that came up this week was the Hunter Biden charges, the additional Hunter Biden charges on tax fraud. And so this is in addition to the federal gun case.
That's right.
And I found it fascinating. You did a video yesterday, Jesse, about James Comer's response to this.
Yeah.
I think he was saying something like it's beneficial or in some way to the Biden campaign that Hunter Biden is being indicted on these numerous new felony charges.
Yeah, he went as far as to say that they're indicting him for not only the gun charge, but these additional tax charges, which add a potential 17 years in prison. They're doing that to protect him. They're indicting him to protect him.
Interesting. I guess that's interesting Republican logic, but we're going to turn to our favorite, my favorite legal analyst on CNN, Ellie Honig, who breaks down how serious these charges are and really how it's not really going to benefit the Bidens, not protect them.
You may recall that back in July, Hunter Biden walked into a federal courtroom expecting to plead guilty to 2 tax misdemeanors with the probation sentence attached. That deal fell apart at the last minute. Now let's look at how things have changed. Now Hunter Biden is looking at 9 separate charges: tax evasion, tax fraud, and non-payment of taxes. And really importantly, these 2, there's 1 count of evasion, 2 counts of fraud. These are felonies now, much more serious. Tax evasion carries a max sentence of 5 years. Fraud carries a max sentence of 3 years. Nobody gets the max, but much more serious than before. Now, if we look at the indictment, this alleges a scheme covering 4 years, 2016 through and including 2019. The allegation is that during that time, Hunter Biden made around $7 million in income, primarily from foreign companies in Ukraine and China. Doesn't allege that those were bribes, does not allege Hunter Biden was engaged in illegal influence peddling as a lobbyist, but makes clear he did not do actual work meriting $7 million worth of income. And the allegation is that he failed to pay and committed fraud with respect to about $1.4 million in taxes owed. Now, the indictment lays out in detail the way Hunter Biden would allegedly commit this fraud. For example, he took false business deductions. The indictment alleges, as one example, that in 2018, he claimed he had $388,000 worth of business travel. But in fact, the allegation is he was doing no business, no real work. So he writes that off. And that's a fraud. The indictment also details lavish personal spending by Hunter Biden, $4.8 million worth of money that the government says he could have easily paid back. Instead, he used on personal expenses ranging from cars and clothes to, quote unquote, adult entertainment. One other interesting thing from the indictment, the sources of evidence that DOJ uses, they use Hunter Biden's memoir. They use things he says in his book against him. It's quoted extensively in the indictment. That's fair play. It's a statement by Hunter Biden. And they use certain texts from Hunter Biden, including one that references taxes. It's not exactly a smoking gun, but they say, well, look, he knew he had to pay taxes. He knew he owed these.
So don't write about crimes in your memoir, I think is one of the key messages that I'm receiving here.
Don't write about crimes anywhere. Don't text about them. Don't email them. Don't slide into somebody's DMs about your crimes. But most certainly, first and foremost, don't write a memoir where you highlight them.
Yeah, that might be a good thing to do. You know, it's interesting. I think Donald Trump was president during this time that he was evading taxes and allegedly committing these fraudulent actions. And
how about this? When he was committing these fraudulent actions that have been alleged.
Yes. So Donald Trump becomes president and he's like, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to really get in there. No taxes for me, allegedly. And so this is Donald Trump's fault is what I'm getting at.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because
Donald
he did
Trump's
not
fault.
stop this from happening.
Yeah, look, when I criticize, and I do, not every time I talk about Hunter Biden, but I will allude to the fact that I'm not a giant fan of Hunter Biden. And I get emails and voicemails from people who think it's because he's a drug addict. And that has nothing to do with the calculus that I make. If anything, that makes me have sympathy for him, that he has these external issues, internal issues that he deals with, the demons that he deals with, he has to do it in public. That's a bummer. That's not the reason that I have less sympathy for him. It's that he's a wildly privileged rich kid who's getting positions not based on his skill set, but on who he's connected to. And, you know, I don't know if it's some petty, immature jealousy that I have, but I don't have a lot of respect for it. You know, growing up poor kids, we don't have the ability to sell $500,000 paintings when we have no artistic ability. You know, I don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's why, for those of you who have emailed and written in and been bothered by the fact that I say I'm not a fan, it has nothing to do with his drug addiction and his struggles. This guy's been through a lot. He lost family members, his mom and his brothers, or his siblings. He's lost his brother Bo. I'm sure he's had some rough times, but he's also had a giant pile of money to comfort him in those times.
Yes, and it's quite comforting when you have a giant pile of money. I wouldn't know, but I've heard good things about it. So it's interesting that Hunter Biden's attorney is alleging that this is a political bias, because you hear this from Donald Trump too, right? That the DOJ is going after him, that Biden has weaponized the Justice Department against him. And so I think this Hunter Biden case really shoots holes in Trump's argument that the Department of Justice has been weaponized against him and is being used by Joe Biden. Because if that were the case, obviously Joe Biden would weaponize that Justice Department to actually protect, not in James Comer's version of protect, actually protect his son from potentially spending years in prison.
Yeah. We'd love to know what you think. 657-464-7609. Of course, you can email a voice memo from your smartphone to I doubt it at Dollemore.com.